So, welcome to the Mining the Dalkey Archive podcast, in which we talk about Dalkey books, talk to Dalkey authors, talk with Dalkey translators. This is our Irish literature series, in which today we're going to be talking about Langrishe Go Down by Aidan Higgins. I am Chad Post from Open Letter Books, and I'm joined as always by Vince Francone. How are you doing, Vince?
Doing good. Well, actually, doing well. Let's be
Doing
correct here.
well. Correct. And we have a special guest today is Angela Weaser, who is a former employee of Dalkey Archive and I believe the longest tenured employee of Dalkey Archive.
Oh, I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't be surprised either, and we can
Yeah,
get into that. It was
yeah,
had a very close
yeah,
relationship with John, obviously,
yeah,
and has
yeah.
now moved on to greener pastures as the primary IT expert at City of Bloomington. I don't know your official title.
Enterprise Systems Manager.
God damn, that's way more. That's way more than like associate professor. So, how are you doing, Angela?
I'm good. I'm good. A bit nervous, but I'm good.
You don't.
I'll survive.
There's no reason to be nervous. There's no reason to be nervous. So we are going to talk about Aidan Higgins' book, like we said, and we've got some other information and material, including the more recent issue of the Review of Contemporary Fiction that had a long essay by Neil Murphy about Higgins and the biography by Alana Hopkin, who is Higgins's longtime wife, called A Very Strange Man. That is a biography of her time with Higgins. So we got some stuff to talk about with him. However, I think it would be more interesting to start out just talking about general Delkey situations. So, Angela, when did you get involved with Delkey actually? And
So
how did this work?
I was a student and follower of Dalkey before I actually started working. So I started at Illinois Benedictine College in 1990
Okay.
um, and became familiar with the press through John was a professor there. And he opened an office, the office in Naperville off campus. That was his first off-campus office. Prior to that, he was doing it out of his basement in Elmwood Park, which he would go on to new student, probably the student you referred to, telling them how he used to do this in his basement. And like whenever we would have a problem with inventory or anything, I used to do this in my, how hard could it be?
I used to do it
So
by hand.
yeah,
I did
yeah,
all the
in a
sales and
ledger, I
royalties by
did all,
hand.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I,
So, so I was
by
a student of
myself in
his.
the
Yeah.
basement, uphill both ways, snowing nonstop in my basement in Chicago.
So yeah, so the office in Naperville, and then when John was Charlie Harris in that picture we looked at courted the press to come to ISU, and he was trying to create the center basically of contemporary lit and publishing, and so he courted the press, and that was at the same time that I was looking at grad schools, and I had wanted to be a writer and figured that if this press that I loved was moving there, it was probably a good place to go to be a creative writer. So I moved at the same time that the press moved. I got involved with John at some point, romantically or whatever you want to call it, oddly. Um, and so I was in grad school, that was 92, 93. I started working for the press in 93, the summer of 93. And then I left in 2005.
So that would be, yeah, 12 years, which is
Yeah,
probably has to be the longest term
yeah,
any
I'm
employee
sure
has.
it is. I'm longer than Steve,
Yep.
longer than, yeah, yeah.
Longer than Steve Moore, longer than Marty by a few years, longer than me, longer than, and nobody else was there very long.
Oh yeah, no.
Surely
And
that
Shirley,
just
but she left, she left like 96,
yeah.
97. So, yeah, it was interesting. Hindsight is 2020. Um, Whenever anyone kind of got good enough to contradict him, there would be problems. And, I mean, if you think of like his professional life, I mean, he had, of course, writers and people that he was in touch with, but people that he actually works day to day with, no one his own age. I
No,
mean,
never.
no one successfully in his age group. It was like always this mentor-mentee position.
Mhm.
And once you kind of challenged that, there were issues. So,
That That's very true. Or if you went to a wedding in Rio, perhaps that would be a problem. For anyone who doesn't know, that involves you specifically, Angela, and one of our former
Oh, who was it? It was an
Cecilia.
applicant. Who was it?
No, it was Celia, from Brazil. So
She went to a wedding.
no. So there's this famous worst job posting
Oh
ever.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. In which it said, like, you can't, if you do any of these things, you'll be fired basically on site. You're not getting paid. And those things were like, question authority, air your own opinions, use your computer for social
Have a
media.
weekend.
You do things on the weekend that are not related to work. Go
Yeah.
to a wedding in Brazil.
Okay.
So and so
But
forth.
we actually did have there was an employee that was an issue. I can't remember who it was. Were you around for that? I mean,
Well,
he was referencing an actual thing.
I thought it was a dig at you because you did go to her wedding, no? Or no, you didn't, but you
No,
wanted.
because it hadn't happened yet. That job um interview or that whatever announcement was before they got married.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah. Yeah.
regardless, like, yeah, no
Yeah.
doing any of those things. Very famous. At some point, I'm going to write about that for this Substack because it is pretty
Well, and
cool.
if you do a search for it, I mean, ultimately he said he was kidding. And I was like, no, anyone who actually worked with you knows you were not kidding, man.
Yeah, no,
Absolutely not.
that was always the
I'm
one thing that, like, the relationship with John, like you say, if you became too seasoned that you could challenge him and be like, actually, things don't work this way anymore. Like, there was a moment where I had that confrontation over some sales thing where it's like people don't bulk order up front anymore. They order low and then restock with like next day delivery. So it shifted like the pattern of how sales come in and the pattern of your cash
Right.
flow. And that's like the case nowadays too. And he threw a lit cigar at me over like the picnic table out at Illinois State. So I've been there. I understand. But but I forgot what the other thing I was going to say was like but you could get to that point where if there's a challenge that was not going to work out. But the other part of it was he did allow people in those positions to check him. Like, I think you, me, and Marty all at various points in time stopped him from his worst impulses in
Oh
one
yeah.
way or another.
And he would, well, and he was, I mean, you could like anything professional, like writing, editing, proofreading, anything you want to that kind of challenge was fine.
Yes.
And he would respond, and it was nothing was sacred, like with text, like things that he would write. But
Yeah.
yeah, he knew that he needed guardrails. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I've been going through digitizing a lot of the old context issues. I don't know if you
Mhm.
have any of the ones I'm missing, but basically, like, there's the ones with like attacking MacArthur on the back. That's like this
Uh-huh.
page has
Yeah.
been censored by our
Yeah.
by someone
Yeah.
in the office, which is Marty stopping him. There's ones in like some of the French books that Jesse Anderson translated specifically that are like the French never gave us any money, so we're no longer they should be promoting the books. There's one that's like anti the Arts Council in England. There's all these things that like are there, but they're all like muted just enough where you're like,
Yeah.
you
Just
can't do
to
the
the
whole
edge.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't do
Yeah.
the whole thing. You can
Yeah.
do this.
And then it's plausible you can say you were kidding.
Yes, yeah, yeah. You can get away with being like it was a joke.
Just
It's just
get
a
to
joke.
that point and yeah, yeah.
So fun. So you worked on though so many books. I do have to say, like when in my time there, I referred to this or told John this as well, was I always saw you as like the ultimate glue of Dalkey. You kept everything together and did everything from like running contracts, creating the databases that track sales, doing the sales report, doing sales calls, doing like everything that needed to be done that like could keep everything running. Like essentially like a true managing editor,
The
but
stuff he
beyond that
did in the basement.
the stuff he did by himself in the basement and like it doesn't take much but like
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
at this point in time at that point in time there are 400 books maybe there's like 1,000 now so like
Yeah.
everything like that by hand is not obviously not at
No,
all
yeah,
possible
no.
but
Yeah.
like everything ran through what
So
you
you told him that?
yeah
Was this the last conversation you had with him?
no, I think he pushed back maybe a little bit, but it was when he forced me to read that book, Good to Great, about like getting in the main thesis of this business book, which
You got
sucks,
to
by
get
the
people
way.
in the right position.
Got to get people in the right position. You got to get the right person in the right seat to be successful. And that book sucks. And I basically told him I thought it sucked, and that like your role didn't fit this model, and that's why I thought the whole book was kind of garbage.
Mhm.
He didn't care for that, but like he wasn't too pissed about it because you could sort of walk that fine line, but it was near the end of all the time there,
Yeah.
obviously.
Well, and I told you that, I mean, so so my leaving him and Dalkey is torrid and whatever, but I still considered him my best friend even up to the day we got divorced. And there were like that last 6 weeks of my living with him, 2 to 3 hour conversations on that fucking swing, because he has to like analyze everything, you know.
Everything.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but one of the things he said in that time period was he credited me for getting Higgins to sign, which I was really surprised because I don't really remember that. But I mean, I was in this apartment. I'm seeing pictures now. I was there. I did go there, and I thought he was delightful. I enjoyed my stay there. I liked the house that we went to. And so the only thing that I can gather from him saying that, and this happened with years prior with the Lila Wallace Foundation with Sheila
Mhm.
Murphy. There was some meeting that we were in that I I don't know if I like countered something or I balanced something. So like, Aiden Higgins and Johnny have two curmudgeons, like, and then here's this, what was I? Early 30s? Yeah, mid 30s, young woman, relatively young woman, smiling and being pleasant and kind of could smooth things over. I mean, I'm sure that's what it was.
I
Um,
think that what I can tell you what they said in here in a second, but I do want to say like that mid-30s thing is very young, except according to this book where he's like, I'm getting old, I'm 35. And it was like, go fuck yourself, Adam. Like go fuck yourself for any number of reasons, but especially go fuck yourself over being 35, calling old. So according to Alana's book, she says that John and Dalkey Archive came to visit him. It doesn't
it
name
was me.
one paragraph. It was
Yeah,
you.
it was just me and John. Yeah.
It's literally one paragraph. Aiden's depressed as shit because his books are all going out of print. Nobody wants to do them. Everything's kind of falling apart. He's up there. He's losing his eyesight. Everything's not good, according to her. This is before he has like a suicide attempt, which I did not know about. But anyways, you guys visit. It says you come to stay. And then that John's saying that he wants to publish all of Higgins' books, starting with Scenes from a Receding Past. Flotsam and Jetsam had come out. He was very happy. Higgins was very happy about that.
Hmm.
John wants to do everything starting with Scenes from a Receding Past, which is not the book that Dalkey started with after that. But anyways, and do everything. And at some point, apparently Higgins was being very shitty and pissy and they were having was being like his curmudgeonly self. It says something like, why should I let you publish my books? And Alana claims that she says, because nobody else will. And that was what like got him going. But I can envision through the lines of this that the two of you are hitting it off and making this like pleasant
Yeah,
rather than
yeah,
two angry old men
yeah,
yelling at each
yeah,
other or like
yeah,
having digs that are under the surface.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
I
it was nice. Yeah, that's my recollection is little. I can't really remember details, but I remember the sense of it. And I mean, I remember the garden, going out into the garden, and it was a nice space, and it's just like a sweet old man.
Yeah. Yeah. The biography of him is really like her biography is pretty interesting in that like it does have a lot of details that are like who they hung out with, who they knew, various events that take place, a lot of like life minutia. But a couple things that are interesting, one that I've been saving for you guys from this before we even get into the book is that she meets him and they instantly fall in love, right? Like there's like instant good friends, live together very shortly thereafter, are together. And she's like, I'd never read him. And she reads, is it Bornholm Night Fairy, I think, has just come out. And she's like, I love this. His prose is amazing. This is great. And then he's mentions Langrishe Go Down. And she doesn't know what it is, then looks back and her first novel in the opening pages, one of her main character has all these books surrounding her and says, I started reading Langrishe Langrishe Go Down and got through like 2 pages and threw it aside because it was so boring. And so in
Oh,
her
that's what she had written?
she got in her novel taking a shot at it. And then in this biography, she goes on to say several times, she's like, it's not a great book. It's just like a literary book. It's not the prose that I think makes him spectacular.
Yeah.
She does have like a hesitancy towards it. And then in this biography too, it gets to like Balcony of Europe, and she's like, this book doesn't work. It's like so interesting to see someone like criticizing that. And at the same time, this biography has like too many, not too many in like a poorly constructed, but too many because it's uncomfortable situations where he's like, well, you're not a good writer. Your book isn't good. And at
Mm,
one point towards the end, when things are falling apart, she's like, I got to get up and work on my book. And he's like, why? Everything you've written is pretty awful. And it's just like this really mean-spirited sort of
right.
vibe that goes through there of like, old man, insecure, wanting to like dominate sort of vibe. So her in this biography being honest with her opinions is really refreshing. But it is sort of funny that like it's not like a praise book. She is like clearly like, I love this. And she particularly seems to love the autobiographies, the bestiary that Dalkey published.
Uh-huh.
But otherwise it's like little jabs here and there of like these books don't work for these reasons, but very funny. Very funny.
Oh.
There's good stuff. One other note on that, like in terms of like criticism of Higgins, there's this famous story that's in here that Higgins repeated several times, in which at a party, Higgins's first wife, whose name I think is Jill, was asking Beckett about Langrishe Go Down. And Beckett and Higgins had gotten in touch and written letters back and forth for years that are in the Harry Ransom Center in Austin. And and Beckett's like, well, I haven't read it, I haven't finished it, blah blah. And she keeps pushing him, and eventually he's like, it's a piece of literary shit, and that's it. which is pretty funny. And then apparently Higgins takes some shots at later Beckett works where he's like, after like Malloy, everything is just technical words and there's nothing there, and it's like not that good. Like he takes some various shots at him too, so it's
But
kind
I
of
thought
wild.
they were friends.
They were friends. They were had correspondence. But
Oh,
when he
okay.
dies, especially when Beckett dies and Higgins is asked to write various things about him, there's like a little bit of like a cutting edge to it,
Oh, okay.
unlike what you seem to think from like their correspondence. But yeah, but that's in there. It's pretty fun. Pretty fun. But anyways, the other thing. Well, I don't. Is there anything else you wanted to ask about Dalkey Times or say about Dalkey Times before we get into the book? Which, warning, we're gonna
Uh,
spoil basically immediately. If you're a plot person, there's no way to talk about this book without.
I don't have any questions about Ducky Times because I was there. I'd be happy to answer any questions. But yeah.
Friends, do you have any questions? I do have one other thing
I
to say is that you
I
were
have
the person who took me to New York for the first time and introduced me to
I
every bookseller.
I actually refer to that because that is and maybe I don't know if this is how you see it, but I feel like I trained you a bit,
Oh yeah,
and I'm very proud of that.
yep,
So I have made reference to taking you to New York. So
100%.
yeah.
Vince, you're gonna ask something. Sorry.
oh no, I was gonna say I have no questions about Dalkey Times that are probably appropriate for a podcast. I have a lot of like would love to sit down with several beers and ask questions that are probably like, talking out of school kind of stuff I get you to do. But I mean, Dalkey is a fascinating. I'm not in publishing really, so this is what's always been interesting to me is I'm kind of a weird lit nerd in the sense that like I did, as I've said many times in this pod in the chat, like I kind of started to collect or get interested in press as the way that like in the 90s I was interested in record labels that were small indie labels. It's like, okay, this label like Discord or these people are putting out this thing, so I'll check it out because I like what they're doing and it's small and it's punk rock and it's got this kind of ethos that fits in with my like, weird Gen X sensibility. And so like Dalkey and a handful of others were really interesting to me at a certain point because they were putting out what I thought was a kind of book that was interesting to me that I assumed, not a lot of people would take a chance on it. And we've talked a lot about like what makes a Dalkey book, and I think that's actually a little relevant for this particular novel.
Yeah.
But so like when I have questions, it's kind of maybe for more of like a really almost like fan nerd perspective. But what I want is like shit talking, and I don't know that that's something I want to make either of you do on the record. It's something maybe we could do another time. But like, it is kind of interesting to me
I
because like,
think Chad's all for the shit talking,
Well,
well,
actually.
I know
yeah,
Chad
talking is
is,
fine.
but Chad is easy with that. I don't have to bait him too much, but I don't want
Uh,
you to be baited in that way.
oh, yeah. No,
You've
I,
got no complaints.
me?
Yeah.
Not about Dalkey itself, no.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
That's true. That's true. I do have that question though that I was going to ask you that Vince you just alluded to. So you were there the longest. You knew John the most, the closest. You're the closest to John, know him better than anyone else that worked at the press or anyone else probably ever. Um, what do you think makes a Dalkey book?
Well, I will say, I mean, so it's a certain aesthetic. I mean, John always used to talk about, is it going to be important in 100 years?
Yeah,
And you don't know that, but it's like you're gambling. I mean, it was a lot easier to do with books that had been published and then gone out of print,
yeah,
and you could kind of evaluate them. Um, so yeah, I don't know what makes a new Dalkey book. I mean, there's a lot of, self-referentialness, it's a very literary collection. You have to like literary stuff. You have to kind of like being a snob. I mean, you don't have to be a snob, but it is elitist. It's not for everyone. Um, so which John would argue for. He would say, anybody can read,
yes.
and okay, pick up Blue Pastoral. Go
Okay,
bring it
that's
to
a
the
tough
bar.
example. That's a tough example.
Well, no, but I mean, pick up a lot of things and even so I have people on my staff who read and they read a lot and if I they would just like stare at it, I mean it's a certain kind you have to learn it for one. You have to learn to like get past the confusing. Like I know, remember when I was reading Gertrude Stein at first, it's so dense and confusing, and the only way to get through it is to stop trying, you know, and just to read it and appreciate what you can and skip by the things that you're not getting. You're getting something. And I think that that's true for a lot of Dalkey books that they're not for everyone, and even for the people that they are for, not in the same way and not all at the same time. I mean, like you could read Blue Pastoral now, maybe if I read it now, 30 years later, maybe I see it differently. Um, there
Yeah.
also is I'm sorry, you were
No,
going to
you
say
go.
something?
No, no, no.
Um, so I mean, from the uh interpersonal dynamics, like the things that John was interested in, like the sky changes, the
Mhm.
relationships, and those kind of um, things. I mean, that is there's a lot of that thread in a lot of what I think of the core Dalkey books.
Yeah. If you were to grab like three themes, it would be like the form over the content, that
Yeah.
the plot's not relevant to the form of it, the sort of repetition and
Yes.
self-reflexivity,
Yeah.
which I'll tell you more about in a second. And then the third thing is broken marriage.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Anything falling apart, any relationship falling apart, that was
And yeah,
immediately
and
attractive.
tortured because it
Tortured.
because it has to be analyzed for 3 hours on the frickin' swing the last 6 weeks of the marriage.
So you
So
guys lived out in Funks Grove, this
yeah,
beautiful, like quite large, I don't know how many
we
acres,
had 5 acres.
5 acres property that very, very filled with a lot of trees because John started collecting.
Oh my God, the trees there now is almost a forest.
Oh,
I mean,
I was there five
yeah,
years ago and it was
yeah.
crazy.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
It's wild. And you had collected dogs, got up to 11 dogs at one point in time,
yeah,
including
yeah.
one named Higgins. There is a
And
thing,
Beckett's. Don't
and
forget
Beckett,
Beckett.
and
Did they get
Beckett.
along?
They did. They did. But Beckett, Beckett was the alpha.
Beckett was
Well,
hard.
there you go.
Higgins was the silly puppy.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Beckett was a Rhodesian Ridgeback and was like beautiful, like
yeah,
badass dog. Yeah.
yeah.
Beckett was
Well, and you didn't know Cubby. Puppy
No,
was
Puppy
named
died
for
before I got
he
there.
was named for Hubert Selby.
Right.
So
And there's Molly, but Molly wasn't Molly.
Molly was Molly Bloom.
It was Molly Bloom? Okay, so I was
Oh,
right.
Yeah,
She was
yeah,
my favorite.
yeah,
And I can't remember the other ones now. There's so many.
yeah.
There's so many.
Mosley, we had
Mosley,
Mosley.
who I'm reading right
Mosley
now. Hopeful.
Mosley was the last straw puppy.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was the puppy that, for I had been saying for a long time, no more dogs. And we were on vacation with Curtis White and George up in Michigan. And in the grocery store, there's puppies for sale. Like you take off, check out these puppies. And like, no, we're not getting another dog.
And the
Oh,
Barcode.
I just want to see it. I just want to see Chesapeake Bay Retriever. I've never seen this kind. So we go see these adorable 3-week-old puppies. And I'm saying no for the whole week. And damn it,
Got a puppy.
we got a puppy.
Got
Yeah.
Mosley. So
Oh, well,
that,
and then Max.
oh, yeah, yeah, that Matt. There's so many. There's so many.
Max, he got behind my back. He cheated on me. He like went and visited a puppy
I think I was
behind my
on that
back.
trip. I think I
You
was on
were
that
on
trip.
that trip.
I
You
think
were
I was.
complicit.
I hated and abetted this. So, that, not to get
And
too much into
that was number 11.
that was a lot. Yeah, my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
So there was not to go too far into this, but you did have to break them up into two packs because they were like
Yes, we
fighting.
had
It
to
was
break
like
it
a
up
breeding problem.
because Molly Bloom and Nikki had a spat, and so then we needed inside dogs and outside dogs. We had Huxley.
Huxley.
We had Toby for Uncle Toby from Lawrence Stern.
Yep.
So I mean, there's a literary thread that goes through a lot of Dalkey books.
And the dog.
Don Quixote and the dogs.
I'm all in favor of
Lawrence
this.
Stern. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm absolutely in favor of naming your dogs with difficult names that are literary. My dog is named Queequeg, which is the biggest mistake ever because nobody can spell it or pronounce it when I take him to daycare or I take him to the vet. They're like, qua, quick, quee, qua, qua. So it's, yeah, now he's Q for short. And then QAnon happens. And now every once in a while when I'm walking,
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
what's your dog's name? And I say Q, I'm afraid they're going to look at me and go, when we
It's
go one,
really
we go
annoying when
all.
they think
Oh my
it's the
God.
wrong reason. Yeah.
Yeah. My cat that turns one today is Gaddis. So
Oh,
Oh, there
keeping
you
it
go.
all alive, keeping it going. Although I pretend that it's for Hunter Gaddis, my favorite relief pitcher from the Cleveland Indians last year.
And not for this.
So yeah, so there's that swing at your property. There was a swing, wooden swing. John would want to talk. He'd always want to smoke his cigars and analyze everything, be it business, be it personal, everything. So there's a novel that he wrote that has not been published yet, and it is about heartbreak, repetition, and sitting on a swing a lot.
I'm a star.
You are the central motif and character in this book.
Yes.
This is very true, which we could talk about later. I really think that book is ready to see the light of day. I think it's actually beautiful, like truly beautiful. It's truly a love letter to you, honestly. And the ending part of it, I don't know if you've seen or read it, but the last pages are
I've
like
seen it. I haven't read it.
heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. The last pages, I think, are like truly some of the like most beautiful, like heartbreaking things I've read. But anyways, should we talk about Language Go Down? Here's a
Sure.
bit of background. Dalkey published 11 books by Higgins, starting with Flotsam and Jetsam, and then followed up by Bestiary being the second. Bestiary is the three-part biography. It was written in three different ones: Dog Days, Whole Hog, and can't think of it. But the as
Donkey something?
I've got it in 2 seconds.
Donkey's
I
Um,
thought there
ears.
was something. There was a donkey.
yeah, Donkey is the third. You're right. So it is Dog Day, Donkey's Ears,
See,
Dog Days, and
I
Whole
still
Hog.
got some proofreading in me.
Boom. We'll get to that in a second. So then Langrishe Goes Down comes out, and the first version of Langrishe comes out in 2004, and then Scenes from a Receding Past comes out in 2005, which I think like of all of his books, those are the two that are most like those three maybe are the ones that are most talked about still. There is like Bornholm Night Fairy, Balcony of Europe gets a lot of attention. And then some of the later ones, Lions of the Grunwald, people have mixed reactions to. There's some that are like a little bit less prominent, but those three, the autobiography, Langrishe, and Scenes from a Receding Past, are kind of I think of as being like the main books of his oeuvre, and they're all like related because they're all semi-autobiographical. I don't think we mentioned yet, but Langrishe Go Down is set at Springfield and Selbridge, which is where Higgins grew up until he was 13 with his three brothers. So there are four sisters in this book. that lived at that house. He and his three brothers lived at Springfield as well, so they match. He's referred to the characters in this book as being like him and his brothers in drag. Although I don't know who Higgins is. I think Higgins is actually the dead sister, maybe the one that could be narrating and not be part of the story. Regardless, those are there. Scenes from Receding Past also
Probably
very
the most likable one too.
probably the most likable one. I mean, I like the women in this book.
Yeah.
This podcast is going to do no favors to my anti-German sentiments that have been expressed. Apologies in advance to everyone. That
Yeah,
is,
Otto.
yeah. My son's middle name is Otto, so there we are. But you know, but anyway, so those are all the books that come out. We get to after John passes away, we start the Essential series to like reprint the key books that especially had low copies, but are like primarily like the key books of Dalkey's backlist, and to do them in a way that like kind of connects them as series, so that you can say like here is like kind of a block of books, much like the Verso series are for different things. That was kind of my concept behind it was that, and chose to do, and this is maybe a mistake, is to do Langrishe before Scenes. And I think Scenes might be a better book rereading this. Even though I haven't read Scenes from Receding Past in a million years, my memory of that is that it's a little bit more, and according to this biography, it is more like varied in terms of like content and form. It is like also like a breakup book. So there we go.
There's the theme. You check that one off.
Check that one off. And was the one that John said he wanted to start with. Langrishe Seas always seemed to me like the one that would be more popular, given that it is like more approachable, readable. It is a straightforward story and was made into a movie with Judi Dench and Jeremy Irons, which I literally just watched and is
Me too.
4 minutes before I called you guys.
Oh no, we watched it the other night.
You're smart. I remembered this morning that I was gonna watch it and it was like 3 o'clock. That's what I'm gonna do. Everything ends at 3. I'm just watching this movie. So we'll talk about that too. So the essentials all have this kind of look to them. That's fine. To give a bit of background, because I know you two have comments on this, these books have been, especially at first, were a nightmare to produce. John had been working with a typesetter in India who is very wonderful, wonderful typesetter, very wonderful person, had a very specific way of laying things out that caused. There's no problems with his layout, but it was very stiff. Like everything and the way that he does it is the same way every time. It's like a template, right?
Hmm.
Getting corrections made to his text was always difficult because you'd have to go back and forth across India. Some things would get changed, some things wouldn't, things would change. It was always complicated. But all these books had to be scanned because there's no files. And I've mentioned this, I
Hmm.
know, many times. They got OCR'd. The OCR process was like so haphazard. And a lot of the books that were older that had been shot originally, so like Language was never retypeset. It was just shot from the old edition. Those ones that had any sort of like grain to them or any
Oh
sort of
yeah, yeah,
fucking nightmare. And when I
yeah.
first started doing these, and this was one of the first books we did, trying to learn how to fix an OCR text is like a steep learning curve. Like you have to get into it and get like what's always wrong, what do you need to look for, what does it screw up, what does it not screw up, how to do all this. And like with one person doing it, it's not the best. So I
Mm.
both did the OCR and then proofed Anuja's text for this and failed miserably. I want to
Yeah,
say
I got
upfront
notes for you.
that I hated reading this book. I hated reading this book. I almost couldn't read it because I'm so nervous that every part was an error. So I found like probably a dozen errors that we're going to fix and just upload to the new file. So you send me yours. There will be a new
Okay.
file available. The book is available like the way that it's printed in short digital print runs. It will be fixed with those things. A lot of them were like not super egregious, really. I didn't think.
Yeah, no,
They're like
they're not
minor,
huge, but
like a
they're
missing paragraph. There's an I instead of a 10, or like an I zero instead of a 10. There's
yeah,
like some widows that shouldn't
or
be
it
there.
instead of in. I mean, I
And
noticed
there's
a
a
couple of those.
I think there's a come instead of corn. There's like those things that do show up in OCR stuff. So everyone who's
A
reading this,
fine rain falling in her head, and it wasn't meant to be metaphorical. It was a physical rain. It's supposed to be on her head.
also,
Yeah, so
reading like
I've
200
marked
pages a
things.
day of this shit was like nightmare, right? I do remember that I did finish proofing this or read a bunch of this where I met two random people who one of whom used to own a strip club while I was working on this at like a coffee shop. So I had like a really different conversation in my mind of proofing this is tied to like a wild sequence of events. But But anyways, that for anyone who's listening to this and has criticisms of the typos in these essential books is all on me. It is my fault. It is hard to do this. I'm getting much, much better at it, and hopefully there will be more help doing it in the near future. But regardless, there we are. What'd you guys think of this book? Oh, summarize it. There's a house, takes place in four kind of years, 37, 32, and 38. 1937, 1932, and 1938. That is correct, I believe. And then the four of the four sisters, Helen is the one who is the oldest and is kind of in charge of this estate that's falling apart. The Springfield house is, for anyone who's watching this on YouTube, this is the house that he grew up in. It is a giant, beautiful Irish house in Selbridge. It's all very true. So his father had to sell it. In this book, the father dies. They're going to have to sell the house. They're selling off parts of the land to stay afloat. And
Trees.
yeah, the trees for £2, which is, I don't know what exchange rates are, but that feels very low. Um, then
Yeah.
Emily, one of their sisters, is dead as well for many years prior to the start of this book. Imogen is the other main character. She is the youngest of the four girls. She falls in love with Otto, who is a lodger in the back lodge who doesn't really pay anything to stay there and is a German student and an arrogant piece of shit. They get involved. He gets her pregnant and leaves her. He does not know she's pregnant. She loses the baby, becomes an alcoholic, and then the book ends with like Helen's death, essentially. And that's basically it. So it's like kind of that classic trope of like guy does bad things to woman, things don't work out, there's sadness, and that Irish tradition of like these grand the old estates and whatnot not functioning in like the modern age and like things shifting in that way. So what do you guys think of it generally?
Oh, that's a downer.
Yeah. Well, that's another typical Dalkey book.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah,
have to be happy.
yeah. I mean, I do the prose that just, I was so watching it, everything that you could see in the movie, he wrote specifically. I mean,
Yep.
so detailed.
Yep.
Just kind of capturing everything he sees. I think I did early on think, I mean, it's weird that the voices, I mean, I know that writers do this all the time, but there is no male voice. I mean,
No.
it's Helen and Imogen.
Yeah.
So
Although, aside from like, I mean, obviously Otto speaks, so we should say that.
yeah,
But you
but
don't
there's
really get much of
no
him.
perspective.
Only
Yeah.
that one section where it kind of runs through his history of being in the
Mhm.
war in World War
Oh,
One.
okay.
And like there's like one like 3-page section that's just like this is who that is, which also feels like a very like Dalkey writerly trick where it's like I'm not gonna like build out this like show don't tell sort of like long extended sequence of flashback of his past, but instead be like, here are the facts. Boom, 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 boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Not playing by those kind of conventional rules. Vince, what did you think? I want to
I
come talk
mean,
about the movie though.
yeah, this is my first Higgins. So I specifically picked this because, well, I picked Higgins because I hadn't read him and I felt as a fan of Irish literature that it was time I did because I've heard so much, so many kind of conflicting and interesting things about his work and about him as a person, which, we can get into that whole idea of the art and the artist, which I don't think we need to talk too much about, but I have thoughts, and especially regarding this individual. But it is funny because I picked this book because I felt like, well, it's a Dalkey essential, so it must be the essential place to start. And I also read it's his first novel, so it would be a good one. But I have Scenes from Receding Past, and that seemed more interesting to me. So it's funny that you say that you think that might be the better book because I didn't. I mean, I like this book definitely, and I think immediately what I realized getting into it was this is this is a book that does what I want in the sense of I'm way more interested in style than anything else. Like
Hmm.
as a reader, I'm always drawn to that first and foremost. But I still like a good plot. I still like, as much as anybody, a story that's going to unfold conventionally or unconventionally in a way that's interesting. But in this case, I'm like, I do not give a damn about the story of this book. I do not
Yeah.
care about the plot of this book one iota. I truly
Yeah.
am only responding to like the interesting sumptuousness of the sentences, the
Hmm.
detail, little bits that sort of come out of nowhere and that are interesting, and then stop and we move to something else. It's very elliptical in the sense of its description. It feels very like an accumulation of experiences. The connective tissue does not matter to me, and I might even argue the connective tissue is it's tissue. it's
Yeah.
not really all that important. And this might sound like criticism, so I'm trying to be very careful on how I'm phrasing this because I don't want it to sound like criticisms at all. I like that, but it's making me curious about later works because I can see all of those devices paying off enough here to be like that was a worthwhile read. But I wonder what would happen if he had that same interesting style, that same attentive detail, that same really great prose style applied to a plot that might actually interesting me more than one that I've seen kind of before, which is, this guy is a dick. He's terrible. Otto's horrible. And, Imogene's, they have this dramatic relationship. And it's not like it's an uninteresting story at all. It is. But he could be, in a sense, he could have been writing a grocery list. And I think it might have been interesting. But I don't care about the grocery list. I care about the word choice. I care about the diction.
Yeah.
So, and again, I have like my favorite sections
And where
flagged
and what he repeats.
and what he repeats
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the sort of things you pick up on the deeper you go into the book that
Mm,
are very much, it feels like Higgins flexing in a lot of ways. And which is fine with me. I like books that do that. I think it's fine. But I know, like, what's interesting to me is I know a lot of readers who would absolutely despise this book for that very same reason is they might argue that this is a writerly book and it's a book that writers and people who are either in that world or tangentially in that world would love, but it's not a book that the average reader would really have anything to lock onto.
hmm
And I find that kind of fascinating because I have a person in my life who sort of said Higgins is the kind of writer that writers like and other people sort of get annoyed with. And I don't know, I thought I'd ask what you two, since you're a little more you're more experienced with him and his works, if that's true or not, if you see that as an apt criticism.
So yeah, I had to say one thing. One, how the sausage gets made sort of thing is that this is the first essential. I just double checked this because there was no stock on it. And there is of scenes. So scenes didn't need to be reprinted when this started. So it could be put off where Langrishe had to be reprinted because it was not available. So that was going to be first sell out scenes, which now has 10 copies available, and then have that be the next essential. So in terms of like the order of it, there is that aspect to it of like you have to keep the rights, so you have to have the book and print part of it.
yeah.
The thing that comes up with like in this essay by Neil Murphy that is also in the biography and also like thinking about it now from the lens of that does make sense is that he starts here where he's like fictionalizing aspects of his life and then continues as he writes to go from fictionalizing aspects of his life to just writing about his life and telling these same stories over and over and over again in these like very literary writerly ways of how to do it to the point where the third volume of the autobiography of the bestiary comes it's sent into Jeff Mullins, who is his, is that right, Jeff Mulligan, who is his editor at Secker, and he's like, how much of this is just the Higgins stories all over again, and is any of this actually new? And that seems to be part of his deal was just rehashing these life stories. So in terms of like his style, I feel like that increases and gets more and more like, unique and special, both in terms of the word choice, but in terms of the structure. Alana goes on and on about the second volume in the trilogy being like really interesting in how its parts are conveyed, and like that there's a lot of humor in one section, this short other like set piece is part two, and like the kind of structure of that, but that the core like content which only mattered so much, was always just directly from life. Like Born Home Night
Hmm.
Fairy is about a real love relationship he had. Balcony of Europe is as well. And he uses the same names for these people that were part of his life over and over and over again. Molly Cushing shows up in multiple books and in short stories where he's just reworking this person that he knew into like these stories that are vaguely autobiographical and also like so stylized that they don't read as biography at all, right? Or autobiography.
Mm.
So I think like, and you're right, but I don't think this is a bad place to start because even though like, yeah, I don't know if normal readers would really gravitate towards it, but it feels like more of an entryway, an easy entryway than like the Bestiary, which is over 1,000 pages, or is about 1,000 pages long, or like any of these other ones that are like very like erudite and a little bit more like the writer's writer vibe of things. This at least has a love story. People love romance, right?
They do. They love romance. It's interesting. Love stories are tricky because people love love stories. I don't know. Do you think people love love stories that work out though?
Mm,
Uh,
yeah,
no. Yeah, I don't know.
I
I'm
don't.
curious. I don't. but I don't.
I
I mean,
I'm
but a
I'm
million
su
rom-coms would say differently. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm still super pissed that Fantastic Four didn't end with the fucking world being eaten. I'm not open to this. So
wait. We don't have
You
to go
just
down this
told
road
us
for
the
long.
ending of the movie.
Yeah.
nobody dies. Just nobody dies. Bullshit. So maybe I'm an exception to your rule. I would
See,
rather disappointing one.
I mean, I like those exactly. I think it's maybe. I get that it's nothing's good. You get a sense early on into Imogene and Otto's love story that nothing's going to work out. I mean, it's not like there's any hope from like the beginning of their
Yeah,
meeting that I think it's ever going to work out. So I don't see that as like something that people should get mad about. You know what you're getting into pretty early, and you either go with that or you don't. You either like that or you don't. But again, and so I was like, well, this is fated to go badly. But I'm on for the ride because I'm on for the ride for like several pages like
other
that I
reasons.
flagged that I thought were like really beautiful or really interesting or really sort of like the subtle little things about relationships that are interesting that maybe make it noteworthy because like boy meets girl or person meets person and everything goes well or they have conflict and then there's a run to the airport and then it's all this declaration of love and it's great. It's not a bad story. There's a template for that in a certain
Just not
context that's
very
fine.
interesting.
Yeah, but I don't need that in this. And this is more, Otto's history slowly unfolding and how that matches against the history of this house and these sisters is really kind of interesting to me. I thought this was going to be a different book, honestly. I thought it was going to be like a Molly Keene style big house Irish book where it was very more about the sisters and it ended the bulk of it is about the love story. So
Yeah.
that was a nice little um, detour for me from my expectations.
Well, in terms of the love story, the one thing I really liked is that at the end where he's going to go off to Mali, and this is in the movie is portrayed slightly differently, but not entirely. Where he's going to go off and he's like, she's sick, she's pregnant but doesn't know it, and she's like, if you leave, just like never come back. And then there's like hesitation, and then she says it again, and he just leaves and never comes back. And I was like, yeah, like right
Yeah.
on. Like
She did
let's
say,
she didn't say just don't bother. The one thing with the movie, just since I mentioned it, that I don't know if you felt the same way, Angela, but one of the things that sort of reflects on what you said too, Vince, is that the movie is weirdly so quiet. Like it's the quietest movie. There's no background
it's,
noise
yeah,
like fucking
yeah,
ever. And
yeah,
nobody's talking. Like every line
yeah.
is in this is
It's
from
all image, it's all scene. And so
Mm.
you said something, Vince, about maybe style isn't what grabs people. Like maybe that's not going to be the draw for this book. I'd say the same thing for the movie. I mean,
yeah.
the movie is not for everyone. My husband very uh, uh, he did not complain. Well, he doesn't complain, but he witnessed the whole thing, and I'm very safe in saying that he was not a fan. So he did not
Interesting.
say anything, but I would expect that that would, if I pushed him, that's what I'd get.
That's really interesting. I liked the movie. I enjoy. It was weird watching it right after finishing the book, right? Because it's like too fresh, and it isn't like they change it. It's like it is
Right.
just the book, right? With like a
Yeah.
few little quirks that you do for like movie reasons. One of which I can talk about in a second. But like it did then bring home how much interior stuff happens in the writing without
Hmm.
being overly explicit. Like there's mentions of his prose style being like sort of like not stream of consciousness, but like this internal monologue. And there are Joycean sort of bits where it's just like word, thing that you saw, little
Yeah.
statement, feeling, and they're not like, they're not like coherent, like blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah, but they just
Yeah.
are there. And all of that comes out in here and gives you an impression of who these characters are, where they're at. And it's not in the movie. The movie just has you have to intuit that through like Judi Dench's looks. I
Yeah.
thought the movie was weird and I mean, I think Judi Dench and Jeremy Irons are amazing. That's great. They're both incredible. They look so fucking like in place. Like they look so like not old, but they're so clearly like characters. They're like movie stars in this movie. Like it doesn't look like normal. There's no like realism. They look so like I don't know, like crafted, like put together, like
Mm.
they're like stage actors. They're like so well cut, and the other characters in that movie all are like kind of amorphous looking, whereas they
Yeah.
two of them stand out so much that
Yeah.
maybe that like works in the movie's favor of like highlighting them, but they just looked so professional and so like important and old and like had this gravitas that like I don't think in the book is quite the same. But like there's
Well,
that's
I
a
don't know.
thing to pick out.
I mean, the characters in the book that are sort of on the periphery are they speak in dialect. I mean, there's a lot of that kind of treatment of them, so it's almost I don't know that it's exact. I haven't seen the movie, so I can't speak to that similarity, but there is something noticeable about how Otto, Imogene, and Helen speak versus other people that are around, caretakers and so forth. And I don't think that that's like a diminishing of those side characters necessarily, but it is like there's a shine to those to Imogene and Otto that I don't know that anybody else gets in this book. Like
That's
even Helen doesn't get the same shine to me.
At least she's like you get to know that she's concerned. She's the one who's
Yeah.
like practical. Imogen's like fucked. Like by the end of this, where she's just like an alcoholic standing on the balcony trying to read these old letters and just like oh like done, just done. And like Lily never speaks and Emily's dead. So yeah, so it really is those two, but at least you get a bit of the one thing that they change in the movie that you'd have to change for movie reasons that is also like a hallmark of Higgins's writing is that in the sequence where they go to see the play and then stay overnight in that the apartment, I don't know, the fuck apartment, and he tries to come on to tries to bed her, and the friends come and there's like that confrontation. That in the book is told out of order. Like those sequences don't happen right? Like you have the scene with her in the apartment, then she explains the going to the play. Like there's a lot of his stuff is like kind of chronologically like mixed
Hmm.
and that in the movie obviously is told straight, like just like
Yeah.
linearly. Whereas in here,
Well,
that's part of the fun of it.
but is it? I fit no, the beginning scene in the movie is in the
That
future.
the beginning scene is in
And
the
then yeah. And so it's kind of yeah, it's
that this one is the one that stood out to me because the chapter just begins with like they're at the house and they're like
yeah.
and he's trying to find the key goes in which door. They find the door and get into the apartment. He explains as a painter is like okay, and then like after that all falls apart, she's like, and I got all dressed up to go to like the play, and then we went to this play, and then we ended up at this house, and it's like oh okay, so there's like a preceding thing to that. Like, how do they end
Yeah.
up there? She talks then at the later part about like him sitting in front on the bus, which in the movie happens prior to that. So there is
Yeah.
something like it had to be aside from what you mentioned, yeah, where he says like Irish girls, Jeremy Irons' character,
Yeah.
Otto says like Irish girls are so like
They're
pure,
so pure.
so
I can't
pure.
yeah.
They're just like the
Yeah.
Irish Spring.
Yeah.
They're clean.
That is, for the record, that is my some of my favorite stuff in the book is when they go to, as you put it, Chad, the fuck house. Um,
I
I do
think that
think,
it was cross stitched and a little thing on the wall. It was like a
Oh, the
yeah.
little
sweet
plaque.
fuck
Yeah.
house.
Welcome
Yeah.
to the house of fuck. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
It was in like Gaelic script, so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was
So
yeah. So
very
you wouldn't,
tasteful.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I do love that section. I do love I mean, there's something about that that sort of picked up as far as not necessarily plot, but like story device, where you have that fish out of water and you have like that
Mhm.
feeling of her otherness in that scene is so strong and so good. Like it's
Yeah.
really, really like you feel it viscerally when you read it.
One thing that stood out to me about the book that I don't didn't really pick up on the movie, although maybe it's there more in subtext than I'm giving it credit for, was like how horny Imogen gets and how much she wants to be like how much she wants to like be kind of used and like sexually like be his sexual partner in a very like giving way. That didn't seem to be in the movie as much as it is in the book. There's some parts in the book where I was like, "Ooh, I didn't remember this being so like like aggressive." Like, okay.
When was the movie made?
1978, is that right? Something around there.
So you could have, I guess, I'm wondering if maybe that was part of it. It's just that's not so overt in film, but I guess 78 you could have
Yeah,
probably
they could
had
have done it.
But she
a
also
little
doesn't really
agency.
say it out loud. It's more like there is one part in the movie where she's like, what does she say? It's not like take me, but it basically along those lines. But a lot of it in the book is kind of like her just being like, I'm gonna go there. I hope that he like does this. Like it's more internal and so it's not like as explicit. And a lot of the Harold Pinter wrote the screenplay for the movie, just to like foreground that too.
Yeah.
and he used like all the lines from this book, but the things that were not direct dialogue are not really in the movie at all. They have to be conveyed in a different way. And I don't know if that part was. I'm gonna see if I can find it. But like, oh yeah, here I'm just opened right to it, page 94. I wouldn't mind being his trollop, him to be cruel to me, as such men are reputed. He could do anything he likes with me. What else is my soft, white, useless women's flesh good for? What else? I hear the leaves shake, the branches part, and he's upon me. I'm coming, my dearest, I'm coming. So like, like that's
Just happened to flip to that, to
Yeah,
open to
yeah.
that.
literally,
Not that the book was
you
worn
saw it
open.
happen.
Not that it was just,
Not, not that
from
it's fine to open.
overreading. Not that the spine broke right there.
Yeah,
No, I
absolutely.
do remember, like, right when you said that, I remembered that section. It's mildly, I don't want to say scandalous because it makes me feel very puritanical, but it is like there are moments that do emerge in the story that are very sort of overt in that way. That it feels like this is not a subtle book necessarily, but there are moments where the style does feel so beautiful that you kind of the moments like that feel almost like a juxtaposition. And I like it. It definitely was like that's what kept me going through this novel. It's not a very long novel. It's not a challenging one necessarily, but like what kept me going as a reader, a first time reader of this, was those sort of like, what's this book going to do next? I feel like a certain sense of anything might be coming because whenever I would kind of what I
She
thought
was
was get a
coming.
little
I'm
bit,
sorry.
well, she was coming. She literally said,
Oh,
"Yeah, there we
I'm
go."
sorry.
love it.
No, don't be. Let's just devolve. Let's just get down to it.
This is the ethos of this podcast. So right here.
But no, like whenever I would sort of feel like I had a grasp on what this book was, it would surprise me. It would sort of things like would happen, whether it was that sort of like overt, imaging sexuality or just sort of Otto getting worse, or like because there's moments where you like him, and there's moments that immediately you hate him. Like it's
Yeah.
not a gradual thing; it's very much an abruptness in a lot of the chapter shapes.
Like when he starts talking about Munich horrors.
Yes, well,
I really miss the
Otto,
Munich horrors. Like what? Like
Yeah,
specifically
she
the
was not a
Munich
fan of that.
horrors.
Yeah.
Yeah, not like none of these Berlin horrors. They're third rate. I mean, gotta stick it with Munich and the Bavarian horrors. But yeah, the things he says about like the way you drink sucks, like the way you eat
yeah.
sucks, the way you like do everything sucks. I was like at first I was like, is this guy a Nazi? And then he like is like Nazi at various or anti-Hitler at various points, but he does want to study with Heidegger.
Mhm.
And he does have like certain fascist tendencies. So I thought like in some ways it subtly is like a characterization of like that sort of German who fought in World War One. And he's like he keeps saying like, well, the German schooling is like real schooling. Like you Irish people don't even have music here. Like all
Yeah,
these
Yeah.
things that are like very pro-nationalistic in a way that like isn't exactly, I mean, it's taking place in, right around that time.
but I made a note about that, and this is me not trying to interject um, contemporary American politics or world politics into this because I'm sort of loath to do all of that. But it's like reading this, I recognized Otto as a kind of guy that I feel like I've met recently who is clearly very intelligent and clearly, university scholar and all these things, who finds a way to twist like to twist things into fitting his sort of strange worldview in a
Mm,
way that is kind of, if not intellectual, quasi-intellectual, but a little bit fascist adjacent. It's kind of like JD Vance is a Catholic, and he's the kind of Catholic who, as someone who was, when you're born and raised Catholic, you recognize as Catholic, like you converted and you're reading some strange 1500s text to justify your horrible worldview. As opposed to like the cradle Catholics who are just like, whatever. But it does feel like there's a little bit of like, I know, like I see Otto and a lot of people I know where it's like he's a clearly intelligent person who might harbor some abhorrent views that he can weirdly justify through this strange philosophical text or these strange ideas that I just like, I don't know. I don't know. It feels like you're doing a lot of you're bending over a little backwards to justify some terrible statements and ideas. So it felt very relevant to me in the sense of like, oh, I know Otto. He's a charming intellectual dick and who's got fascist tendencies. But what is
What
it? Isn't
was
that like, oh, go ahead.
I'm
No, go
thinking of
ahead, Angela.
our and probably shouldn't say names. I'm thinking of our German fellow.
I thought of him too. Was actually like I wondered if you were going to bring him up or if I was, but I did think about that. There was a fellow who was at Dalkey for a period of time who was German and
And
had
I think would fit this mold that you're describing.
1000%,
Yeah. Yeah.
thousand
Yeah.
percent, yes. I
Yeah.
pictured that's who I pictured reading this book.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah. I could totally see that. Yeah.
like it's like, yeah, that
Well,
would make sense.
also the Catholic comment. So you going back to what makes a Dalkey book or the thread of Dalkey. At some point we realized that I was the only person associated with Dalkey, and we're going back like generations of, not generations, but lots of employees because lots of people came and left because, whatever. I wasn't Catholic. Everybody else was raised Catholic.
As Catholic, raised Catholic.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was, and it was really interesting. But
Yeah,
so it was like a certain sense of humor. I mean, they weren't like practicing devout Catholics, but they were Catholics. And and really, I mean, John did not, I never, well, not maybe a funeral. I went to a Catholic funeral with him. But he did not go to church, but he was still very Catholic.
super.
Um, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
I was surprised that like, asking him at one point I said something about, well, it's kind of metaphor, like Adam and Eve weren't literal. And he's like, yes, they were.
there's a kind of, I mean, I was raised Catholic. I'm Italian Catholic from Chicago, South Side, and went to
Irish
Catholic high
Catholic.
school.
Yeah.
So there you go. It is a thing where I think you understand where I am not practicing. I am so critical. I'll say this, Chad, even though it's going to bring controversy to your pod, but like I really have nothing but like deep, horrible criticism for the Catholic Church.
And
So I don't think that's too horrible thing to say, but there it is. But at the same time, like I was talking with one of my friends who's Jewish about this, who's not a practicing Jew, but is culturally Jewish. I'm like, I think that's a thing with Catholics too. You can be culturally Catholic in the sense of like you don't
Think
really
so.
shake it. You just don't shake it. You don't practice and you don't really believe it and you're contemptuous of the people and the machinations of the church and all the horrible things that I think they've done. But you just it's part of who you are. It's like in your bones in a weird
Yeah.
way. So it almost is funny to me that there's a lot of Catholics who went through Dalkey because everything I've heard is that you have to be a little self-flagellating to be able to put up with
that's
that. Like,
that's the part that I was gonna. Yep, exactly. You got to have that guilt. You got to work off. Yeah, I
Chad,
agree with you.
Chad, aren't you Polish Catholic or
I'm
no?
Polish Catholic, and like with the new Pope, I've heard various people I would be talking to, and they're like, "I think the new Pope seems pretty good." And I was like, no, no, every Pope is bad. There's no way that the Catholic Church is going to be like
Can
not
I
like church
can
now.
I can I just go on the record and say that he's from Dalton, Illinois, not Chicago. I'm just going to put that out there as a Chicagoan and let that drift.
Also,
Come at
fan
me
of
if you like.
the wrong Chicago team.
Well, there's that. Yes, that is absolutely a thing. But I'm going to make a lot of enemies for any Chicagoans
I
listening
mean,
because they just want to claim him.
I do appreciate a Pope who likes dongers that are hitting stadiums out of the ballpark instead of the other sort. But
Yeah,
that's like
well,
low bar to cross.
yeah, well, he can.
That one will get us in trouble.
Yeah, possibly yes, but yeah, I mean, it is something where it's. I mean, this is maybe what attracted me so often to so many of the Irish writers is that like that Catholicism is sort of a, if not a practicing ideology or a practicing belief, it does sort of underpin so much of the sort of experience of the mentality or the character. And I don't know, I didn't really think about that in regards to like maybe the German coming in and betting and this Irish girl and kind of like that conflict of perhaps like Lutheranism or Protestantism, but that might, I mean, it's something that I think a person with more research in this could do a paper on with this book because it could be like something that's underpinning this thematically. But I find that fascinating.
I always find that interesting too with like when we talked about contemporary readers of books like this, there's sort of the idea that like I mean people that read a lot of books read a lot of books. I don't know that they're reading books like this either. I can't remember if we said that at the beginning of this before we got on. But I also feel like that part of that is that everyone wants things to be what they are now. Or a lot of the readers I talk to
Mm.
want it to be like things are now. To go back in time to like the 30s and to see this as like this is when like that kind of like sexual relationship is not okay. She's very cautious about it. There's like she does say something about if he uses condoms, he's like, never. I have a son, by the way. And she's like, wait, what? Like you just like you just drop that knowledge. Like there is like they hide everything's like that part of it. Like to accept that that's the way the world was, I think is a stretch for certain groups of students that I've had, and a certain groups of readers, weirdly. But also
Really?
yeah, a little bit. Like there's a little bit of a push where they're like, that's not how things are now kind of vibe. Like their appeal, they what appeals to them are books that are very much of the moment. And not things that are of the past. But then I also think that part of that is that, and this is a broader, more controversial statement, is that they don't know about any of this. We were talking about before we got on, like all the important indie publishers of the time that you and I were at Dalkey, Angela, like
Hmm.
Douglas Messerly's, the Alan Kornblum's, the Fiona McRae, but even before Fiona, Scott Walker, like these people who are like and Jim Sitter, people who are integral parts of like this particular ecosystem, this part of publishing. People don't know who they are now within publishing. And then when you
Yeah,
get to the books, like there's a lot, there's like so many gaps. Like people don't read like, oh, I read Beckett and I read Joyce and I'm going to read Higgins and I'm going to read O'Brien. I'm going to go in this way.
right.
They're like, I read I don't know whatever. What's the popular Irish book right now? I read Angela's Ashes and like Angela's Ashes
Oh
gets
my God, that's from 30 years ago.
Okay, I was going to say, oh, well, curious since you're on this, Chad, and this is for both Chad and Angela. Have either of you read Small Things Like These, the Claire Keegan book? Because we can shit talk for a minute if you don't like it, or we can praise it, whatever your feelings are. I'm curious though, because like
I
that's the Irish book of
have
the
it.
moment to me.
That's the one I was trying to think of. I have that, but I have not read it.
Yeah. Angela's Ashes was 96.
That was
Yeah,
a
Before you
while
even
back, Chad.
before
the
you
only
even made
reason I
it to
think
Dalkey.
that book was
Like,
so huge. It's in this book because there's one point where Higgins and Alana are at a big party, and his book is I forget which book it is has just come out. They're talking about it, or it's just come out and it has not been reviewed, which is a thing I want to mention and come back to, loop back to right here in a second. He doesn't get reviewed. And then he vanishes. And Alana's like, I don't know where Aiden went. So she like goes home and he's there in bed. And she's like, what happened? And he's like, did you hear that the only book they talked about was Angela's Ashes? So fuck that. Like he's like goes like this is like a part of his persona where early on he gets a very mixed review, I think, for Langrishe Go Down by Eileen Battersby, who is the number one thread of this podcast. We've read her book. She's in every episode. She shows up. It's amazing. She gives it a very lukewarm sort of review, very not super positive. He gets pissed. He writes to her referring to her and another critic as like the Dublin feminist who ruined his career and made him not popular. And then for the next 30 years, periodically writes them letters just criticizing their reviews and their papers. So very much a Delkey author in that regard, I think. It's like
it's, dude, I like my respect for her has just increased more and more. We talk about her from that one book of hers that I read for this very reason. I mean, it is interesting to consider that idea of what you saying earlier about like students today sort of wanting things to be like now, which I think this is a book that you can't really that won't work. This book wouldn't work in that context. Is what I'm thinking of. I don't know. I'm thinking maybe when I was in college, I think the big domineering literary theory was new historicism, which was a lot of my professors were very strict about. You have to put this in the context of when it was written. So you're not just going to read like Huck Finn. You're going to read everything you can from 19th century America of that time, like to kind of put yourself into the context of that era to better understand this text and put it in conversation with other things. And I'm not like enough of a good literary citizen to always do that, but I try to. And it's just, that seems to make sense to me. But it's interesting to consider that students aren't necessarily doing that. Cause like, that's why I brought up Small Things Like This is like, I don't have a problem with that book, but it's not great in a sense of like, I think what it does that people like the reason why people love it, it's like the Irish book of the moment is because it's got a story that's true about the Magdalene laundries and these like poor girls who are condemned to that life. But there's kind of like there's a guy who's clearly a good guy and he saves the girl. Spoiler alert. And that sort of it sort
Damn
of
it.
really fits with like all the things that people want, which is like we want good heroes. We want somebody who's an unimpeachably good guy to come and fight through the small moral quandary and then do the absolute clear cut right thing and
yeah.
it works out. and I don't dislike that completely, but it's a little bit of a bummer because this book doesn't have like this is not that book, and like
No.
I don't think you can read this without like the reason there's a very specific reason to me why it is set when it's set. Like writers don't do this arbitrarily. Like it's the 30s for a reason, and maybe that is and him being German. I think that's not unintentional.
I don't think so either, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm babbling. Sorry.
German between the First and Second World War. Absolutely.
Who did openly shoot French people during World War One and was on the front lines of the German army, conscripted but nevertheless participating. There, and when I say that too, I think of it more as like not books that they're assigned in class, but books that they choose to read. Have like a level of identity politics, like in their free time, of like books that reflect, what you want to see, like what you're saying, or like what you wanna be in, and not being totally like, here's something that's like outside. They're gonna say shit that I don't like. It's gonna be like a little bit weird. But that's interesting. It's a little bit more of like I'd rather read a romantasy that's like, contemporary and has characters that I can identify with. I don't know. I
I
think
mean,
that's starting to change, but I think it's still a little bit there.
I'm all for contemporary readers confronting maybe what's wrong or bad or problematic about these things, but I don't love when they're like, I shouldn't be exposed to this, or I don't seek this out. I mean, there's definitely aspects. So I wanted to ask you both about this because you're both more Higgins exposed than I am. So, Balcony of Europe, because I've been reading about other books to read. Is there like some weird Nazi plot in there that people is
That one
turning
I've
people off?
not read. That did came out after I was there, and it was not, and I have it, but I have not read it. It's a fat one. Did you read that, Angela?
No.
I mean, a lot of these came out after both of us left. Like it was through scenes, and Windy Arbors was the last one. That's like criticism and essays that he wrote. That was the last one that I remember reading. And then after that, I read Lions of the Grunwald, which is dismissed in the biography, and I feel like is accurately like made a minor work of his. It's very funny at times. It's based around like the idea of being in Germany on one of those is it DAAD grants, but he renames the organization as that, where its acronym is Dildo. So a lot of jokes revolve around Dildo helping him like, stay in Germany. And it's fine, but it's not as strong as this. So like some of those I have not read, but Belkin in Europe I'm very intrigued by, even though she seems to be like it's not great. It's supposed to be like a sort of very Dalkey sounding book of like a character reflecting on their experiences as they happen in a non-diary way, but diary-esque. And the essay in here in the review of contemporary fiction, it does have a big section on that. And it sort of like makes it sound much more interesting in terms of like that approach and the form than her biography does. So I'm curious about it too, but it is a big fat one. But I did
It's a
read
fat
Beast
one.
Spray too, and that I think maybe broke me at the time when you had to like read that for like marketing, and it's like 1,000 pages. I think I was like, I'm good with Higgins for a while. Like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna back off. I do have a great quote from her about John though that we're talking about, and then kind of goes back to where in this
From
there's
who?
from Alana Hopkins
Okay.
in her bio. It's talking about it's actually Peter Murray's record of the event that took place where it's towards the end of Higgins's life. They're having this special event for him. John's going to interview him. The Fragility of Form, which was comes out, and that is the critical book that Dalkey did, the scholarly
Hmm.
book on Higgins, which footnote is the worst selling Dalkey book of all time. It has sold fewer
Yeah.
copies than any other Dalkey book. And
Huh.
it has essays by John Banville, by Comtoiben, however you say that, by Annie Proulx. It's like star-studded, and yet I think it's sold like 29 copies. I mean, it's like a
Oh,
really
wow.
tell you exactly in 1 second. Um, but so that's come out. He's having kind of his moment. It has sold 20 copies life to date, as of like last June. So up it if you want to, but I don't think it has. So everyone who's listening, go buy that book. You will be the rarest Delkey reader if you read that book. You are the champion of Delkey fandom. So this event takes place. They're gonna have Aiden's gonna read, and then John's gonna interview him. And Peter Murray's record of the event begins with like Higgins going up to the mic, blah blah, and then starts to read a pre speech that he wrote. It says, and you guys are gonna love this. John O'Brien, the most elusive of publishers. He publishes a great deal. He is hard to make out, if you know what I mean. You spoke of doubles. We are doubles. From the moment we are born, we are doubles. We don't know it, but we are. John is divided himself. Sometimes he's a grouch. Sometimes he is sweet natured. I had a fair amount of experience with Calder. John O'Brien is an easier man to get on with once you get to know him. Just
Then Calder, yeah,
the
I would
Calder.
think, yeah, that's a very low bar. I remember stories about Calder.
Calder shows up in this book a lot,
Yeah, yeah.
which is super fun.
Well, and I think I met him at a what did it used to be called? The convention?
DEA?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's quite possible. I met him a few times in London, and and you'd remember distinctly if he had his coat. He had like the full three-piece suit, and
yeah,
they're all very threadbare. Even though it didn't need to be, he had like the I think he had the means to like have a better. But that was part of his shtick. Is also like,
yeah.
or
And
I have no money, I
my
can't pay you. I can make
my my
myself.
memory of him, there was some like rumbling about contracts and paying,
Oh yeah,
and yeah, yeah,
yep.
That's what I always heard. He's like legendary for that, right?
yeah.
He
For
bragged. He
Not
stiffing
bragged.
people.
paying royalties.
He
Yeah,
bragged about never paying Beckett
yeah,
a dime because he would say that any advertisements he took out came out of the royalties. So he would take out an ad or say that he took out an ad that made the royalties back to zero. So he just never paid him and would just be like, that's part of the cost of doing business sort of thing. So yeah, infamously, there's a bunch of posts about Barbara Wright, and there's one that includes some of her comments on Calder and like
well,
how he was like, just kind of she loved him, but he was like he is charming and was very much a caricature, but also, traditional con man. Which speaking of, I
right.
got my Grifter's Gonna Grift shirt on from our store, so all fits together pretty well
So
here.
what is it? Let me see.
It's this is from the other podcast we do, the 2 month review
Oh,
podcast.
okay.
It's on Confidence Man by Melville.
Oh,
It says
Melville.
the
Yeah.
fidelity, the ship that they're on, and then says Grifter's gonna grift. Just like kind of the mantra of that whole book and season. So I don't know. There's anything else that you guys really wanted to talk about or picked up on in this that you think is of interest?
I mean, the stuff that I highlighted, which I didn't, I mean, I've got pages that I looked at that are when I was reviewing this again for the pod, that stand out to me are so they don't add anything to the actual plot, as I said earlier, going back to that idea. They don't add much except they're just this sort of these things adrift. They're just like the Flotsam and Jetsam, to kind of name check another one of his books, that kind of just accumulate into this story that I just think are so kind of cool. And I'll just like, just for the sake of not of putting some meat to that bone, like on page 177, I don't know why I highlighted this. Like, I don't really know. Like, looking back, sometimes I'm not very good about making notes. I just sort of underline and put an
It spoke to
exclamation
you.
mark. Yeah. And it's just like, what is it that spoke to me about like this section where he writes, Otto studious, indoors all day, reading, making notes, then silence. Page turned briskly, creaking of his unupholstered chair, his quiet breathing, a heavy sigh escaped him, to be followed in a short while by another, more hollow and profound. The book lay on his lap, slips of paper protruding from its pages, Brackenbury's campaign in the Crimea, Hauptmann's Hanel's Himmelfahrt, a plate of bread and honey on the table beside him. She had brought a honeycomb from Finletter's because Otto was fond of it. It's like, a beautiful paragraph that doesn't, it's not like poetically beautiful. It is, as you were saying, Chad, kind of a Joycean, here are some staccato fragments, and you can kind of
It
have to do a little bit
absolutely
of,
creates a scene. I mean, the
right.
unupholstered chair. I mean,
Yeah.
it just, yeah.
But
It
it's
does
but
tick
it's
all
sort of
those.
it's that quiet again that I love. It's the quiet little minutia that I think was most interesting about this. And it's like those are the things that I think when I go back to this book, because I'm probably going to reread it at some point in my life, I'll appreciate even more. Like I'll remember, like I'll look for. So the plot's fine, the story's fine. I know you said you couldn't not give it away. That's just how this book is.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, give it away because
Right.
like there's so many little things that you can't that I can't really put voice to that I think are really interesting about that.
It does that section that you read does check those boxes for like realism in the sense that you can feel and see and experience what's being said there more or less, but it doesn't do it in that direct like I'm going to explain this in words that are sentences
Hmm.
in this way. but has that like very much beginning of Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man sort of vibe of like the impressionistic style of it. And that's what
Hmm.
Hmm.
I was thinking of with Joyce. He did go to Clown Glows as well. So to Higgins did.
Oh,
So there's a
so there's
direct
a
connection there.
He went to where?
How do you say that?
clown goes.
You say
Yeah.
it right.
This Joyce's school, the same school
Joyce's-
that Joyce
Oh,
went
okay.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just making
Here's
up shit.
so do you both know more about this individual than I do? I mean, he is mentioned by a lot of critics as being the heir to Beckett specifically, but also like Beckett being the heir to Joyce. There's this kind of like, when I do the Holy Trinity, I do in the name of Joyce and Beckett and Flann O'Brien. So that's my big three modernists from Ireland. But like Higgins is kind of seen as the next generation from those guys. Like I know it's basically like Joyce, then Beckett, then O'Brien, and then Higgins. I was he aiming for this? It feels like maybe there's an intentionality behind that on his part, but I don't know.
That
Yeah.
he's trying to be Joyce
I don't
in
know
this
that
sense.
he's
Yeah. I don't know, but I will say that that was also a common thread in Dalkey books. Uh,
Mhm.
Published the James Joyce of whatever country it was coming from. I
Yeah.
mean, we had that a lot of the covers. That was the reference to being
It was
published.
kind of an in
like
joke at some point. Like Three Trapped Tigers is the Ulysses of Cuba.
Cuba,
There's
yeah.
yeah, we
Well,
did a
that one I can see. Like that
yeah.
one makes sense to
Well,
me
and
because it.
The Fernando del Paso.
Yep, that's coming out
Oh
Yeah,
again.
yeah,
yeah.
That's the Ulysses of Mexico.
Mexico, yeah.
We had at
There's
Letter, we have the Ulysses of Iceland in Gudberger Bergson's shoot, what's the person's name? The bestseller book. Thomas Janssen bestseller is the Ulysses of Iceland. So yeah, we got tons of Ulysses of blank or
I
Joyce of
mean,
blank.
I get that as a constant comparative, but it is such a thing where so many Irish writers, again, to kind of bring this to the context of like the Irish tradition, post Joyce, like it's a big shadow. It's like how do you live in that? And so many writers kind of like intentionally tried to break from that. I like Beckett's intentional choice of breaking stylistically because he realized his first books were too influenced by Joyce. Makes sense. And O'Brien, sort of clearly being influenced, but also like being very hostile to the tradition of Joyce, saying if I hear his name one more time, I'll foam at the gob. I could see like that, and it does feel like so many writers are like very sort of rebellious of that, in which I would absolutely understand. But Higgins almost he seems different in that sense of that generation who's leaning into it a little bit more. Like this is a mentor, this is an
This is
influence.
my heritage.
Yeah,
This is where I'm from.
He does use a lot
this
of
is
personal details too, like Joyce does. Like they don't they I mean they stray and invent things. Finnegan's Wake clearly is like the extreme of that. But there is like in Portrait and Dubliners, like those feel like the most Higgins like books in that sense that they are like taking the life and taking bits and pieces of it and then putting it through this like style that then recreates like what that reality was in a way that's like has its own kind of fingerprint and way of doing it. Whereas like Brendan Behan and like some of the people that we've talked on here, like John Toomey and then the Groton and me didn't talk to the author, but those books, I could see like where they've, been influenced, they've read Joyce, they know all this stuff, but they're not really doing that. And I don't even know that they're
no.
antagonistic towards it. They're just doing a different thing. So I feel like there is like a lot of Irish writers that are incredibly literary that are Joyce influenced but don't feel like the heir to Joyce. Whereas I could see
Hmm.
Higgins being a little bit closer to that, especially at the beginning of his career. Like, and this comes out in 67. That's not that long after like Ulysses and Finnegan's Wake. I
Yeah,
mean, it
like
is,
30
and it is
years.
30 years. It's not like now if you're like, I'm writing the next Ulysses, like that's 100 years ago. Like your influence in being like, you're like the next Joyce feels like an impossible statement to make given like just the gap in time. But at that point I could see it being like, oh yeah, you're like in baseball, you're the next Mike Trout. Mike Trout's still playing, right? Like they're there. So you can make that comparison versus like that gap. I don't know. That's neither here nor there, but
Okay,
I'm
interesting. Just
sorry.
a little side thing. I bring.
I have to say Arno Schmidt, the German
Oh,
James Joyce.
the German James
German
Joyce.
James
Yeah,
Joyce.
yeah, yeah.
Bottom's dream is the German for sure. Austrian, I believe. In fact, we could separate out and make that
There's
even more
a
specific.
there's a Romanian writer that Dalkey published that I've never been able to
Benea.
get through.
Who is
Yeah,
it?
maybe. What's the big book? I read an interview with John O'Brien where he said when he said like, well, name three Dalkey books, and that was like the first one he named.
It's
Annihilation.
That's the
No,
Polish.
not an
That's,
island. That one I
that's like
know.
that's Polish. The Sip and Egg book would have been probably Vaynard of the Fugue, but there are other
Yes.
ones that he wrote. Vaynard of the Fugue is a nice thin book. I'm gonna reread that actually, a bunch of his books, for a thing that I want to work on. But he's really interesting, and he's not Joyce in the sense that he's more like the Nouveau Roman, which is another kind of line of that repetition, the retelling, the attempt to retell, the attempt to get it right, to go back and recount that. That's the structure of like John's novel. That's like a lot of Dalkey novels. Is this like even there's a Greek novel called What Did Mrs. Freeman Want? That's very
Hmm.
much this guy basically like on a beach trying to tell a story and figure out like what are the beats to this story? And that's one thing that shows up a lot. There's a Angela, you knew Ben Slotky.
Yeah,
His book Romantic Evening, what is it called? Oh shoot, those are the words, but that's not the order of them. His book is a guy at like what was the name of the movie theater that Ben bought?
the
Uh,
castle.
yeah, the Castle, Evening of Romantic Lovemaking. So the story of this book is this guy who has bought this movie theater and is rehabbing it, but it's
Oh my
failed.
God, I didn't realize. I didn't know that book exists.
Yep, and he failed so badly that it became the largest like bankruptcy case in Illinois history.
Wow.
And in this book, that's the setup for it. And this guy's on stage trying to like tell his story and be like, "You're trapped here. I'm going to blow this all up when we're done. Like this is the end of it, but like I got to get this out." And he keeps trying to tell this. It's a very funny book, and he keeps trying to
I
like
was
get it
trying to think
right.
of his name recently because we were at the castle. It's a
Oh,
music
yeah.
hall now. Um,
Oh, very cool.
and it's great. I mean, he really started something. I mean, I know his movie house flopped, but the work that he started doing, I mean, that helped it get to the next step. But I was trying to think of that his name. I knew it was Ben. I couldn't remember the last name. So, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
didn't know
There
he
you
had a
go.
book out.
You get it. It's great. It's excellent. It's an excellent book. Related to, I think we probably should wrap up, but related to what you're saying, Vince, one person that we should have on here at some point in time or try to is Rob Doyle, who edited the
Other
other,
Irish tradition or something.
which sort of sketches out Delkey's sort of like is sort of a thesis on what sort of book Delkey's looking for in
Yeah.
Irish literature in particular. Also, there's an interview with John in which he claims that Rob Doyle is like the preeminent Irish writer of contemporary times. And he does have a number of books that sound very interesting. I've never read. I only know him through the name, but they're blurred by like Ryan Chapman, people that are like
Oh,
are contemporaries and like very, interesting good readers. So I'm curious about that and continued on our exploration of like
yeah.
we define these books, what sets them apart. And some of the essentials is like they are going back in time. I mean, New York Review of Books does reprints and does their thing, but they're adding on new reprints versus like re-going back into what you've
Yeah.
done before to say
The
like, I just want to reestablish this.
the book, The Vain Art of the, is that what you're referring to?
Yep.
It's sold out according to your website.
That's cool. I don't know that that's true. I can I can tell you in 2 seconds.
You want
Uh
to keep those rights, Chad?
Art of the Fugue is sold out. The website, if the book's not in stock in their bookstore, it's not
Oh,
in
it's
stock.
not. Okay. All right.
So
It's not
that's not always accurate.
it's not sold out of publisher inventory. It's sold out of the store.
Exactly, exactly. In some cases, but that one is a zero. He's on my list for that exact reason. And to see like, is that the book that we do as the essential, or John did like 9 of his books. There's like one of John's favorite
Hotel
authors.
Europa or something like
Hotel
that.
Europa is the other one that I have not read that I really
I
want.
have that on my shelf. That's been on my shelf for years, and it's another one of those formidable texts that I haven't gotten to.
1,000% I've been talking about for years, and it's going to happen in 2026. Is there are all the hotel books that John loves, and I want to write about John's obsession with hotel books. There's like
What?
so,
Like what?
Hotel Crystal's another one. He would always talk about like books
Oh,
that like take place in hotels or have hotel. Like those are books he loves. Like I don't like his travel obsession and but also anxieties. Like it's
oh
all
yeah. Well, he didn't travel.
no.
His travel was late in life. I mean, his moving to Central Illinois, 120 miles away from where he lived for, the first 50 years of his life was huge. And then traveling, it was huge. The shift, the change.
I remember he abandoned, he at the last moment, he decided not to go on our trip to Iceland and Barcelona that he was going to go on. And I went by myself, which was totally fine and ended up being like a wonderful
I
experience.
was around then, wasn't I?
You were in the car because you were driving us to catch the bus to get the plane. And he at
Yeah,
the was like, I don't want to do this and just
yeah,
didn't. So like the
yeah.
fact that he has all these books that are about hotels, I think is really kind of fascinating, like, and very funny. But anyways, anything else you guys want to mention for this? Otherwise,
No.
we can announce that
Mhm.
our next book is going to be, we're going to stick in like a similar area here where we're going to read Alana Hopkins or Hopkin, who was Aidan Higgins' wife. She has one book, Dogs of Inisheer, which is a collection of short stories. We're going to do that for August. So we'll be back in not too long to talk about that for our Irish series. Get it now. It's pretty short, won't take very long. But we will do that, and then I'll finish the biography that she wrote by then if there's anything else relevant we can talk
So
about.
that's a Dalkey book?
That is a Dalkey book. It came
Oh,
out in
cool.
2017. She
Cool.
references it getting published a few times in this bio too. And her career sounds very interesting. A lot of travel books, some novels, and then this collection. And she continues to write. She's very active. So more like contemporary active writer for us to look at. I mean, I
Cool.
guess we've been doing that the whole time, but anyways, we'll do that. So in the meantime, you can follow us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're not subscribed to the Substack Mining the Dalkey Archive, please do. There's also the 3%. It's called 3%problem.substack.com. That's the one that covers all open letter books, but also includes things that are outside of that, but are more generally about publishing and about other publishers, interesting books and authors and all that kind of stuff. And tell your friends, rate, review, do all the fun stuff. Watch us on YouTube. You can see all of us looking cool, drinking our Guinness Zeros and our, what was it,
Our
Dead Guy
water.
Ale? And our water.
Dead Guy Ale, which
Dead
I'm
Guy Ale,
officially
nailed it.
endorsing. Yeah.
Nailed it in one,
So
yeah.
Dead Guy Ale should give me some money for that,
I,
whatever.
I've been going through this like my non-alcohol journey on all of our podcasts, and I have tried to use a different non-alcoholic beer to introduce on every single one. This is the first repeat, and every single one of those motherfuckers owes me money.
Yeah,